Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. So guys, because we are in the midst of the NBA playoffs, it would seem fitting to make some NBA playoff content. So I got this idea when I was going through bracket fights. We've made a lot of bracket fight videos. You know, brackets, it's awesome, it's fun, it's entertaining. And I found this one specifically about some of the greatest teams in NBA history that never won a championship, teams that could have been historically great, but just came a little bit short. So it's basically arranged all these teams that fell just short and put them in this random bracket, and we're going to go through it, and I'm going to give you my opinion on which team is better in that specific matchup until we have a champion, and that champion will be the best team that I think never won a championship. Obviously, you could make a case for many of these teams to be the best to never win a championship, so definitely comment your opinions. But with that being said, guys, let's do a bracket fight list with the best teams that are ringless, guys. So we're starting with this first matchup, which is a really good one. The 95 Magic or the 2002 Kings. These are two teams that were #1 seeds in their conference. The Magic with a really young Penny Hardaway and Shaq duo. Obviously, we all remember this team. They got to the finals. They beat Michael Jordan in the semifinals, but they got swept by the 6-seeded Rockets. And then you have the 2002 Kings that were one game away from the NBA Finals. They lost to the Lakers, who three-peated that year. But a lot of people think, in a much stronger Western Conference compared to the East, that the Kings would have won the championship had they beaten the Lakers. So even though this is close, but honestly, I love this Kings team with Chris Webber and Peja Stojakovic and Mike Bibby and Vlade Divac. I think they were more ready for a championship, a lot more players in their prime, whereas the Magic, even though they were great, their core was still really young and they were kind of overwhelmed, I think, by the big moment of the finals. So I will go with the Kings despite the Magic having gone further. I really think the Kings were just one game away from winning the championship that year. I think they would have beaten the Nets. Speaking of the Nets, we have, I think, the 2002 Nets, and the 2017 Spurs. 2002 Nets got to the finals, but again, it was not a good Eastern Conference. And then you have the 2017 Spurs. These are the Spurs that might have had a chance to beat the KD Warriors the first year KD was on the Warriors, but obviously Kawhi Leonard hurt his ankle in game 1 of that series when they were up big. They blew that lead, and they ended up losing I think it was a sweep. Maybe it was... No, it was a sweep. It was a sweep. And I think that was kind of a dirty play by Zaza Pachulia. Who is the better team? Honestly, I'm going to go with the Spurs. The Nets team barely won 50 games, and the Eastern Conference those couple years, no disrespect to the Nets. I think Jason Kidd was maybe the best point guard in the NBA at that time. I think they were a pretty good team overall, but they were not a finals caliber team. Probably one of the worst teams to get to the finals. So the Spurs, I think, won 60-plus games that year. So I'm going to go with the Spurs. We have the 2013, I believe, Knicks against the 2006 Mavs. This is interesting. These are the Knicks with obviously Melo, Stoudemire. The last time they were contenders, I would say. I think they were the 2 seed in the East this year, but they lost to the 3-seeded Pacers in the semifinals with Paul George and Lance Stevenson and those up-and-coming Pacers. The Mavs were the #1 seed in the... I'm sorry, this is the 2007 Mavs, I believe. This is the team where they won 67 games. Dirk was the MVP, but they lost to the 8-seeded Warriors. Man, both of these teams were pretty disappointing at the end of the day in terms of where they lost in the playoffs. But I'm going to go with the Mavs. I don't think you can't argue with the team that was the 1 seed, had the MVP. I think they were the better team, even though they went out earlier. Then you have the Jazz of either 97 or 98 against the 2018 Rockets. Now, this 2018 Rockets team, it's going to be forgotten historically, but they were the 1 seed in the West. I think they won like 65 games, and they came 1 game short of beating the Warriors in the conference finals, and I think they would have beaten the Cavs that year, the year LeBron carried a bunch of nobodies. No disrespect to those other players on the Cavs, carried them to the finals. They were basically 1 game away from the championship. I think they were up 3-2 on the Warriors, but Chris Paul hurt his hamstring, and they lost the next 2 games. But this Jazz team with Stockton and Malone, I think it's one of the best teams to never win a championship. Back-to-back years lost to Michael Jordan. I don't think there's any shame in that. And they got to the finals. They were that close. I think they were closer. So I will give it to the Jazz of either 97 or 98, even though the Rockets were a great team. The 2012, I believe this is the 2012 Thunder against the one of the Clippers teams. I think 2014 or 15. honestly, the Clippers had a really good team, could have won a championship, but they never even got to the conference finals, and they choked big time. I wouldn't say the Thunder choked big time. They lost to LeBron and them, and this was early in Westbrook and KD's careers. It's a shame that they never got another chance after 2012, so I will give it to the Thunder because they did get to the finals, and they did not disappoint. The Clippers always did, so I'll give it to them for that. Then we have the 2000 Blazers against the 2004 Lakers. Obviously, talent-wise, the 2004 Lakers were much more talented. Obviously, these are 4 first-ballot Hall of Famers right here. The Blazers, they had an interesting team because at the time, they didn't really have a definite star player. They just had 5 really solid starters and a deep team, but they were 1 game away from getting to the finals in 2000, beating the Lakers. Obviously, we all remember or we all know about, hopefully, the Lakers comeback in Game 7. They were down double digits in the 4th quarter. Blazers kind of choked a little bit. Lakers came back, and that was the beginning of the Kobe-Shaq dynasty. But I think the 2004 Lakers team is better. They got to the finals, even though they disappointed. You can't argue with their talent, and they lost to a really good Pistons team. Then we have the 96 Seattle Supersonics, probably the best team in franchise history. Actually, no, the 79 Sonics that won the title, my bad. Then the 93 Suns, 2 victims of the Michael Jordan, of the Michael Jordan era, obviously, that lost. These are 2 teams that lost to the Bulls. No shame in that, obviously. So who is better? You know, it's tough. Both teams are really good, fun to watch, dynamic, but I will go with the Suns because Chuck was the MVP that year, and they just had a really, really good team. They were the #1 seed in the West, won over 60 games, and honestly, they were good enough to win it all, honestly, to be honest. I think that might have been Michael Jordan's best opponent. Maybe the Jazz, you can argue, but Suns were legitimate that year for sure. Actually, I believe this is the 2012 Thunder. I apologize. You know what? Hang on. I think, all right, guys, so my bad. This is the 2012 Thunder team. I think that was the 2013 Thunder or 14. I think one of those Thunder teams. I still think that Thunder team, whichever one it was better than the Clippers because the Clippers, I just can't give it to them. So this 2012 Thunder team or the Suns from 2000, I think this is the 2010 Suns, and I'm only saying that because Amari Stoudemire was #1. For a while, he was number 32, and he changed it later on. So this team, the Suns team, got to the conference finals, lost to the Lakers. This is when Kobe and Gasol and the Lakers went back-to-back, 2009 and 10. That was a really good team, but I think this Thunder team was better. They got to the finals, and they were on the verge of being a dynasty. I think they just were, if they stayed together. I don't know why the Thunder traded James Harden that offseason. I don't know. I think it was a really stupid move for Kevin Martin. I just don't get it. All right, then we have the 2002 Kings against the 2017 Spurs. I'm telling you, the Kings, if they were on the verge of being up 3-1 against the Lakers, if Big Shot Bob doesn't get that tip ball back to him, Vlade doesn't tip it back to him, he doesn't make that 3 at the buzzer to tie the series at 2, I think the Kings definitely win that series. So I will go with them. This was just a fun team to watch in a small market. They really put Sacramento on the map. And they were one of the best teams. They're going to be one of the more forgotten teams because they didn't win a championship, but that is honestly one of the greatest teams of all time. Then the Mavs 2007 or the 97/98 Jazz. Look, you can only go so far with a team that lost in the first round. I will go with the Jazz. Honestly, I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Then we have the Thunder of 13 or 14 against the 2004 Lakers. See, this is the team. If this is 20, this could also be 2016. This could be the team. Honestly, I'm thinking this is 2016. I think this is the team that blew the 3-1 lead against the Warriors. Oh man, I can't give it to them for that choke job. Even though the Lakers should have won that series against the Pistons, these are kind of 2 disappointing teams when you think about it. Disappointing endings to their season. But I will give it to the Lakers. They did get to the finals. So I'll give it to them. Then we have the 93 Suns or the 2012 Thunder. Okay, I think the Suns might have been more ready to win a championship because Chuck and Dan Marley, Thunder Dan, and Kevin Johnson were more in their primes. But that Thunder team was so exciting. So I'm not just going to go by potential. I'm going to go by who was better at that time. And I will go with the Suns because they lost in 6 games to Michael Jordan. And the Thunder lost in 5 games, and they were young, and you can make more excuses for them. Obviously, the Suns losing to Michael Jordan, that Michael Jordan losing to him is a legitimate excuse. It's tough, but I will go with the Suns. Then we have the 2002 Kings or the 97-98 Jazz. Man, the Kings had a good run, but this is where the Jazz, I think, take over here. They got to the finals 2 years in a row. They were that close, so I'll give it to them. Then we have the 2004 Lakers against the 93 Suns. Man, this Suns team is going to be forgotten, but they were so good. And I don't think because this Lakers team had such high expectations, I don't think a lot of people really expected the Suns to get to the finals that year. So because of that, and, they were just a more well put together team. They played better as a team overall, whereas the Lakers, I felt like they didn't win because the chemistry wasn't there. They had the talent to win it all, but there were a lot of big personalities were clashing, obviously, because Shaq left the next year. So I think this is where the Kobe and Shaq beef kind of got in the way. So I will go with the Suns because I think they were a better overall team. Then you have the 93 Suns and the 97-98 Jazz. And because I'm kind of combining those 2 years, and they got to the finals 2 years in a row instead of the Suns, who only got there once, I will give it to Stockton and Malone and those two Jazz teams. Then we have the right side of the bracket. Sorry, guys, if you can't see it. It's just the bracket's too big to see the whole thing. But we have the Rockets, one of the years with T-Mac and Yao Ming against the Cavs. I believe this is the 2009 or 10 Cavs. Neither of these teams were that close to winning it all, but I will give it to the Cavs because most of those years with LeBron, they were the number 1 or number 2 seed despite LeBron having to carry a bunch of scrubs like he's done many times in his career. Then we have the 2011 Bulls against the 2018 Celtics. I believe this is 2018, but I'm going to give it to the Bulls because they, the Celtics weren't really healthy this year. Kyrie Irving was hurt. This is, I think, when Gordon Hayward had the devastating injury. So I can't hold it against them. I think they lost back-to-back conference finals to LeBron's Cavs. I will give it to the Bulls because this, I believe, was the year D Rose was the MVP. They were the 1 seed. And, I think they had a legitimate chance. They had an incredible defense. So I'll give it to them. I think they were the better team. I believe this is the 97 Heat against last year's Suns. The 97 Heat, I think, were the 1 seed this year in the East, but they lost in the conference finals to guess who? Michael Jordan and the Bulls. This team was really good. They had Tim Hardaway. I think they had Glenn Rice, Alonzo Mourning. Obviously, there's, two Hall of Famers right here. Last year's Suns team was really good, but I don't think they're one of the greatest teams to not win a title because they had a lot of young players other than Chris Paul. Maybe if this Suns team, we'll see what happens with the Pelicans, they're fighting them, but maybe if they don't win the title this year, then maybe they can be in this category. But I'm going to give it to the Heat. I think they had more players in their prime. They were more ready to win a championship, and they were the 1 seed, I believe, versus the Suns being the 2 seed. And I think the Suns' run last year was a little bit surprising. I think the Heat overall, defensively with Pat Riley, I think that was probably a better team. Then we have the Rockets when they assembled Clyde Drexler, Olajuwon, Chuck, and Scottie Pippen. And then we have the 2013 Lakers. See, now it becomes a discussion. When we talk about better teams, are we talking about expectations, talent, who should have been better, who actually performed better? I believe this is the 97 Rockets who got to the conference finals, whereas the 2013 Lakers were the kind of like this year's Lakers team, were probably the favorites to win the title, but so severely disappointed that honestly, I'm personally not going to say that this is one of the best teams to not win the championship because of how disappointing they were. You can't just say talent-wise or expectations they were one of the best teams. The Rockets got to the conference finals in 97, so I'll give it to them. Man, that 2013 team was tough. I mean, that was the year Kobe tore his Achilles, everything. That kind of is the reason the Lakers missed the playoffs the next 6 years, and I think history's unfortunately repeating itself this year, coming from a Lakers fan. Then we have last year's Nets team against the Cavs team of 2018. I think this Cavs team, this team lost in the conference semis last year in 7 games. Obviously, Kyrie Irving was hurt. James Harden was hurt. KD probably played the best series of his life, in my opinion. He played like every minute of those games, and it was a valiant effort, but Giannis and the Bucks beat him. But this Cavs team, even though they traded Dwayne Wade at the deadline or before the playoffs, LeBron somehow got this team to the finals, and they surprised people. I don't think they disappointed at all, considering who LeBron had. So I'll give it to them as the better team, just for being more of a pleasant surprise, being better than we all thought. Then we have this Cavs team against this Bulls team of one of the disappointing Cavs teams, probably 2009 or 10. And then we have the Bulls team that was the 1 seed with D Rose as the MVP. And they had an incredible defensive team, defensive identity. They lost to the Heat in 2011, the conference finals. I think this was the year the first year LeBron was in Miami. I'll give it to the Bulls. I think they just had such a great defense, and that alone made them, I think, the better team, better contender for a championship. And then we have the 97 Heat, I think, against the 97 Rockets. You know what? I will give it to the Rockets. I think this was a really good team. This was their 1 year. I think the 1 year where their core was young enough. They had that small window of winning a championship before they lost to the Jazz. I think starting the years after, Chuck and, Olajuwon, Drexler, Pippen, they all started to get old. So, actually, I'm sorry. Pippen wasn't on this team. What was I saying? 97, he was on the Bulls. But they did have Chuck and Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon. So that team had a chance. They had a chance to win it all. Then we have that team against the Bulls, 2011 Bulls, man. That 2011, I love those Bulls teams because they were just so physical, so defensive minded, holding teams to 70 or 80 points kind of seemingly most games, and I liked it. Tom Thibodeau, that defensive identity. Everyone loved D Rose, so I'll give it to them for that reason. Maybe if they had another year or two, unfortunately D Rose got hurt, so that's what's sad about it. And then we have that same Bulls team against the 2018 Cavs. I think that Bulls team was better. I just think they were too young to, it's understandable, but that was a great team. I'll give it to them. And then the finals, just the way this bracket is set up, the 2011 Bulls against the 97/98 Jazz. And I think when you think about it, when you think about the greatest players in NBA history to never win a championship, Stockton and Malone are both of them are kind of in that top 5. You think of maybe Chuck, Stockton, Malone, Elgin Baylor, right? They're right in that conversation. To have two surefire Hall of Famers, both not ever win a championship, be such a great tandem. Historically, Stockton, the all-time assist leader. Malone, third all-time in points now that LeBron passed him. These are two all-time greats, back-to-back years getting to the finals and not being able to win. I think I got to give the nod to them as the best team to never win a championship. So guys, that is our bracket. For some reason, I'm noticing we don't have a bottom right of this bracket, but I think these are, for the most part, I think the best teams to never win a championship. I think the Jazz, those two Jazz teams, take the cake. But guys, definitely comment your opinions. Who are the best teams to never win a championship? Let me know who wins your bracket fight right here. Who wins the bracket in your opinion? Guys, like the video if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're an NBA fan, NFL fan, or MLB fan. Guys, I'm going to be live streaming the NFL draft on Thursday. I think that's going to be the next video. But guys, until then, if I see you then, if I don't, I will catch you guys later. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.